So those 20 points of knowledge, Krishna says, Etad jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad atonyata. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides these, whatever it may be, is considered ignorance. So mostly what's taught in schools is ignorance. It's not real knowledge. And it just takes people farther away from Krishna. So that therefore they get stuck in a cycle of birth and death. To understand what is real knowledge, that's the real purpose of Bhagavad Gita and listening to bona fide teachers. So before one acts, there's some impetus, there's some inspiration. And any solution arrived at before work is actualized in a subtle form of work. Right? Like you're making plans. I want to build a super reactor. What do you call it? A perpetual motion machine that creates more energy than what it uses. This has been the dream of everybody. So that it creates more energy than what it uses, so it's a perpetual motion machine. It never comes to an end. Right. So, dreaming about that, planning for it, that is a subtle form of the work. Then work takes the form of action. We actually make the investments, acquire all the raw materials, have the final plans, etc. But before the actual action, there's 3 psychological states: thinking, feeling, and willing. And all those 3 states is part of what's called impetus or inspiration. And the inspiration to work is the same if it comes from scripture or from the instruction of the spiritual master. And when the inspiration is there and the worker is there, then actual activity takes place by the help of the senses, including the mind, which is the center of all the senses. The sum total of all the constituents of an activity is called the accumulation of work. Okay, so
if the inspiration is material, then it will collect the karma. If it is
it will have karma, yes.
If it is related to Krishna, then it will not collect the karma.
Well, if the intention is pure.
So
if the intention is corrupted, then there will be karma.
So it should be pure. So my question here is that when we are in this stage of inspiration, thinking, willing, feeling and willing, we try to struggle there to change our inspiration. It started with the material thing and we want to correct ourselves, like okay, it was material, I want to do it for Krishna. And so I can try to change that one or to make it Krishna consciousness, so it will require karma or not.
Well, it depends who is advising you, right? It's very difficult to see within oneself a material motive, right? We discussed that yesterday. Arjuna is using Krishna consciousness to achieve his own personal goal, right? So that's not pure intention. When you read the description of the gopis, they have no desire to please themselves. Their only desire is to please Krishna. There's no hesitation also. They'll sacrifice everything to please Krishna. So that means they're completely in love with Krishna. So unless you have a spiritual mentor or teacher, or teachers, Shiksha and Diksha gurus, you'll never know for sure if your motive is pure or impure. I mean, you can rationalize anything, right? But you have to have an outside, let's say, validation. And this is the 18th chapter, 58th verse of Bhagavad Gita. That's what it says. That no conditioned soul actually knows what is to be done and what is not to be done. But a person who acts in Krishna consciousness is free to act because everything is prompted by Krishna from within and confirmed by the spiritual master. 18th chapter, 58th verse, last line. Everything is prompted by Krishna from within and confirmed by the spiritual master. 1858, the last paragraph of the purport.
No condition shall actually know what.
The last line. Okay. And then the last line of the previous verse, 57, in the purport, it says, if one gets a bona fide spiritual master and acts according to his direction, then one's perfection of life in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. Now, the key word here is bona fide spiritual master. That's the key word. Because you can meet so many people that claim they're spiritual master. I mean, one time in our old temple here, I gave a lecture, and afterwards someone asked me if they could speak to me in private. And I said, okay. I said, what is it? He said, do you know who I am? I said, well, I've never met you before, but do you know who I am? He said, well, I said, I never met you, but I'm going to let you know. So he pulls his wallet out and takes a card out of his wallet. And it's the card is issued by the International Rosicrucian Order, and it has his picture, and it says so and so. This gentleman, so and so, is an incarnation of God, and it has some stamp on it. He said, "Do you know who I am now?" I said, "Well, I know less now than when I didn't know you." He said, "What do you mean? I just showed you my card." I said, well, it's just a piece of paper. I said, anyone can make a card. Like, what? This is by the International Order of the Rosicrucians. I said, I know. And I said, I know who the Rosicrucians are, but you do not have the qualities of God. He said, what do you mean I don't have the quality? How do you know? You don't even know me. I said, I know you because you just showed me your card, didn't you? He said, yes, but you don't believe it. I said, no, but you have to have the qualities of God. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, Chintamani prakarasatma sukalpa viksha laksha vrite susurabir abhipaliyantam lakshmi sahasra satasambrahma sevyamanam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. I said, these are some of the qualities of God. You don't have any of them. He said, what do you mean? What did you just say? I didn't understand one word. I said, well, see, that's another problem. You don't understand God's language. You know, so how can you be God? You don't even understand the language of God, which is Sanskrit. And this verse says, Ishvara Parama Krishna. He said that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is spoken by Lord Brahma, the secondary creator of the whole universe. I said, do you remember creating the universe? He said, well, it was there all the time anyway. I said, no, that's not true. I said, you see, you don't really know very much about God, so how can you be God? You should know everything about yourself. So, I mean, I don't have to keep going, but, he got stuck, he got flustered, and he sort of walked out. He was really upset. He called me ignorant. So, you see, there's a standard. There's a standard for spiritual life, and it's called parampara. Krishna explains this standard in the beginning of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. See, if we don't follow the standard, just like there's a gold standard, there's a universal, there's time standard, there's so many standards, right? And they're to avoid confusion and misconception, right? So it says, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavam aham avyayam vivaswan manave prahur manur isvakave bravit evam parampara praptam imam rajasayo vidu sakalena hak mahata yoganasta parantapa. So Krishna says, in the beginning of time, the Supreme Personality Godhead, Lord Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku, the first king of the sun dynasty on the earth. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. That's why Krishna respoke this science 5,000 years ago to Arjuna. But there's a standard. What is the standard? The standard is the words of the Bhagavad Gita spoken by Krishna. The standard is there are qualities by which you can recognize if someone is transcendentally situated. And there are also qualities of God explained in the Bhagavad Gita in depth. In fact, in the 8th chapter, in the 7th chapter, 8th chapter, 9th chapter, 10th chapter, and 11th chapter, there are exhaustive explanations of the qualities of God. Like, for example, it says in the 8th chapter, Kavim Puranam Anusasitaram Anor Aniyamsha Anusmaritya Sarvasvadataram Achintya Rupam Adityavarnam Tamasa Parastat. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and he is transcendental beyond this material nature. This is some descriptions of who Krishna is, explained by Krishna himself. Who would know better who he is than he himself? And what would be a better explanation of Krishna than Bhagavad Gita, where he's speaking about himself? You see? So, this is a standard that we have to rely on in order to understand if something is veritably or is factually, if someone is factually Krishna or not Krishna, if someone is actually a pure devotee or not a pure devotee, and what is the behavior of a pure devotee. See? The behavior of a pure devotee is given in 16th chapter, 1st to 3rd verse. Abhayam sattvasam sudhir jnana yoga vivastiti danam damascha yagyascha swadhyaya tapa uchit tapa arjavam ahimsa satyam akrodhas jagasantirapaisunam dayabhute sololutvam madhavam hir akalpalam teja samadriti socham adroho natimanitihi bhavanti sampadam daivim abhijata shabharata. This is 26 qualities of a pure devotee, and each one is explained exhaustively. 16th chapter, 1st to 3rd verse. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, fearlessness, abhayam, sattvasam sudhir, purification of one's existence, jnana yoga vivastiti, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, Dhanam, charity. Damas, self-control. Chayagyascha, performance of sacrifice. And Dhanam, Damas, Chayagyascha. Swadhyaya, study of the Vedas. Tapo, austerity. And Arjavam, simplicity and honesty. Mm-hmm. tapodanam, swadhyaya tapo arjavam. Ahimsa satyam akrodas, non-violence, satyam, truthfulness, akrodas, freedom from anger. Ahimsa satyam akrodas, daya bhutesu aloludvam, and compassion for all living entities, and absence of covetousness or absence of excessive desires. Akrodas. I'm sorry, and then tyaga, shantir, renunciation, shantir, forgiveness, and apaisanam, freedom from fault finding. And then mardhavam here, akalpalam, gentleness, modesty, and steady determination. Tejas, vigor, or energetic. Tejas, shantir, forgiveness. Tejas, shantir, driti, socham. Driti means fortitude, and socham, cleanliness. Adroho, freedom from enviousness, natimaniti, and the absence, or let's say, absence of the desire to be honored. Bhavanti sampadam daivim. These are transcendental qualities, O son of Bharata, that are belong to saintly persons endowed with transcendental qualities. So here you have 26 qualities of a pure devotee. Right here, it's explicit, and each one is explained in depth. It's a very long purport that explains each one of these qualities. So this is a standard. One time Prabhupada was asked, what do you think of this Swami and that Swami that have come from India? He said, they are not standard. This means they're not following the standard of the acharyas. They're not following the standards established by Krishna himself. If you don't know what the standards are, then you can't tell who's for real, who's not for real. That's why there are standards, right? Just like you have standards for different types of computer languages, right? They're standardized. And you have what's called standardized extracts, and you have standards for weights and measures, and all these things. There's standards, right? There's also standards for pure devotees. There's also standards for pure devotional service. There's also standards for who is God. And if you don't know them, then you're ignorant. Then you can't differentiate who is real, who's not real. So the whole purpose in spiritual life, the standard of spiritual knowledge is the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, this is the greatest Vedic literature because it's relatively short, it's succinct, and it has the sar, the essence, or the pure cream of the Vedic knowledge. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam is more elaborate information that's given in the Bhagavad Gita, right? So it's even more elaborate information. So now, we're continuing with the art of work. Now we're going to go, so is that enough? We discussed enough about the inspiration, right? And the instruments of work is the work itself. The worker are called the constituent, and the instruments of work are called the constituents of work. The instruments of work, the work itself, and the worker. But the inspiration is knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower. That's the inspiration of work. And then there's the constituents of work, or the instruments of work, the work itself, and the worker. And the three psychological states before work is done is thinking, feeling, and willing. Okay? And there's 5 factors for every action, and they are the place of the action, which is the body, the senses, the person, the different types of endeavors, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So unless we know all these things, we'll get confused of what's right, what's wrong to be done in life. So it's not a simple subject. There's a lot of factors to take into account. But if we follow the 6 points of logic that I explained at the end of the class yesterday, you'll never get confused. You always make the right decision. Only do those things favorable to Krishna consciousness, and reject anything unfavorable. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. When in doubt, ask either Siksha or Diksha Guru, and only engage in those activities that are pleasing to Krishna. So if you follow the 6 principles of logic, you'll never have a problem. You always make the right decision. Okay, so now we're going to discuss 3rd chapter, 4th verse, Nakarmanam anarambam, Naiskarmyam purusho asnute, Nacha sanyasanad eva siddhim samadhigacchati. Because Arjuna, in the beginning of the 3rd chapter, asked Krishna a serious question. He said, look, Krishna, I'm getting a little bit confused here. It seems as if you're equivocating in your words. Tell me what's better, renunciation of work or work in devotion? Because it sounds like you told me before I should renounce everything, and then you're saying I should do something. He says, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? That's the question. First verse, 3rd chapter. So Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has very elaborately described the constitution of the soul in the previous chapter with a view to delivering his intimate friend Arjuna from the ocean of material grief, and the path to realization has been recommended. Buddhi Yoga, or Krishna consciousness. In other words, using your intelligence in Krishna consciousness to always be engaged in devotional service. Sometimes Krishna consciousness is misunderstood to be inertia. Inertia means not doing anything. Some people think, oh, neti, I should renounce everything. That way I won't have any karma. But not doing anything has karma also. Let's say. And some people think, oh, Krishna consciousness, I just go to Haridwar, Rishikesh, get a little, stay in some ashram, and I do nothing. I go bathe in the Ganges, sunbathe, eat, and do a little bit of kirtan, listen to a little bit of the pravachan until I have a headache, then I go to sleep. No, that's not Krishna consciousness. It's not. That's called inertia. It's not doing anything. And one with such a misunderstanding often withdraws to a secluded place to become fully Krishna conscious by chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna. But without being trained in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it is not advisable to chant the holy name of Krishna in a secluded place where one may acquire only cheap adoration from the innocent public. Arjuna also thought of Krishna or Buddhi Yoga or intelligence in spiritual advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerity at a secluded place. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. But as a sincere student, he placed the matter before his master and questioned Krishna as to his best course of action. In answer, Lord Krishna elaborately explained Karma Yoga, or work in Krishna consciousness, in this 3rd chapter. So Arjuna says, I'm bewildered, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Actually, Krishna did not give any equivocal. Equivocal means you could take it this way or you could take it that way. It's not clear which way he means. But actually, it's only because of his confusion. There was nothing equivocal about what Krishna explained. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Should I fight in this ghastly warfare? Or should I use my intelligence and not be engaged in warfare in which there'll be a winner and a loser, right? So Krishna then says, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. So one class of men who try and understand the truth about spiritual life, they use speculation, and they use their reason and logic. And others just engage in a devotional service to the Lord. So, Prabhupada says, philosophy without religion is, religion without philosophy is speculation, and philosophy without religion is fanaticism, right? So, and he says that here, religion without philosophy is sentiment and sometimes fanaticism, while philosophy without religion is mental speculation. The ultimate goal is Krishna, because the philosophers who are also sincerely searching after the truth come in the end to Krishna consciousness. This is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, Bahunam Janmanamante Gyanavamam Prapadyante Vasudeva Saramiti Samahatma Sudurlabhaha, 7th chapter, 18th verse. That after many, many lifetimes of speculating and taking this path, that path, one may eventually come to the truth by which they understand Vasudeva Sarvamiti, oh Krishna, you are everything for me. And such a great personality is very rare, right? The ultimate goal is Krishna, because the philosophers who are also sincerely searching after the absolute truth come in the end to Krishna consciousness. This is also stated in Bhagavad Gita. The whole process is to understand the real position of the self in relation to the super-self. The indirect process is philosophical speculation, by which gradually one may come, notice the word may come, to the point of Krishna consciousness. And the other process is directly connecting with everything in Krishna consciousness, in other words, through devotional service. Of these two, the path of Krishna consciousness is better because it does not depend on purifying the senses by a philosophical process. Krishna consciousness is itself the purifying process, and by the direct method of devotional service, it is simultaneously easy and sublime. So, of the two paths, the acharyas have all recommended devotional service. Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Mudamate. Even Sankaracharya directly says, after having written the Sarirak Bhasya and misled people, he says, forget about all of that nonsense, just surrender to Krishna. Bhaja Govinda, right? So even Sankaracharya, he's an acharya, because he's also speaking the truth in the end. And the last words are more important than the first words, always, in the words of spiritual authorities. So we should take Sankaracharya also as our guru, not when he wrote Sarirak Bhasya, but when he said Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda. So now we come to the verse today, Nakarmanam anarambam, naiskarmyam purusho asnate, nacha sanyasanad eva siddhim samadhi gacchati. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So there's 2 points here. One is not doing anything, right? Some people, the Buddhists think if you don't do anything, then there's no karma. But not doing anything has also karma, right? Or renunciation of everything, renouncing everything, right? Not this, not this, not that. So he's saying you don't attain perfection merely by abstaining from work, nor by renunciation alone. And Prabhupada writes, the renounced order of life can be accepted when one has been purified by the discharge of the prescribed form of duties. Okay, what is it? Purified by the discharge of prescribed form of duties. which are laid down just to purify the hearts of materialistic men. Oh, so what is he talking about here? He's definitely talking about deity worship for grihastas. Definitely. Deity worship is definitely recommended for all the grihastas, because grihastas have a tendency to develop material attachments. So deity worship is, well, Prabhupada, I'm going to get to this later on, tomorrow, but Prabhupada, there's a quote where he says, if grihastas don't engage in deity worship, they'll definitely fall down. Outright he says that. They will definitely fall down. So that's why he's talking about prescribed form of duties which are laid down just to purify the hearts of materialistic men. Without purification, one cannot attain success by abruptly adopting the fourth order of life, sannyasa. According to the empirical philosophers, simply by adopting sannyasa or retiring from fruitive activities, one at once becomes as good as Narayana. Well, this, of course, is nonsense philosophy. Right? But Lord Krishna does not approve this principle. Without purification of heart, sannyasa is simply a disturbance to the social order. On the other hand, if someone takes to the transcendental service of the Lord, even without discharging his prescribed duties, whatever he may be able to advance in the cause is accepted by the Lord. This is Buddhi Yoga. Swalpam apiyasya dharmasya chayate mahato bayat. Even a slight performance of such a principle enables one to overcome great difficulties. In other words, even a little bit of devotional service is highly beneficial for the aspirant. So therefore, devotees, by hook or crook, they help people and do some service, because it's ultimately very, very beneficial for them. So then the next verse says, Nahi kaschit sanamapi jatu tistatik akarma krit. Karyatehi avasa karma sarva pakritir jaya gunai. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Very important verse. And in the purport, Prabhupada makes a very important point. He says, it is not a question of embodied life. It's not that if you have a body in this world, then you can't stop doing something. He says, it's actually the nature of the soul to be always active. Without the presence of the spirit soul, the material body cannot move. But it's not that because you have a material body, you're always moving. It's the nature of the soul. That's the main point. The soul is always active. So, therefore, the Mayavad philosophy is an illusory philosophy. It tries to make the soul inactive. And that may be possible for some period of time, but it cannot be sustained indefinitely, because the soul has a natural tendency to be active. The body is only a dead vehicle to be worked by the spirit soul, which is always active and cannot stop even for a moment. As such, the spirit soul has to be engaged in the good work of Krishna consciousness, otherwise it will be engaged in occupations dictated by illusory energy. So this is a big point. Either you serve Krishna or you serve Maya. There's no in-between. There's no gray area. Either we're always engaged in Krishna's service, or when we're not Krishna conscious, we'll be engaged in Maya's service. There's no third option, right? There's no gray area between. There's either or. Either you serve Krishna or you serve Maya. And Vyasadeva saw this. He actually saw Krishna, but behind Krishna he saw Maya. Then he understood. If you're not Krishna conscious, immediately Maya takes over. And she's always looking for even a little area in our life where we're not doing something for Krishna, and she'll come right in there. So you have to be engaged 24 hours a day in Krishna consciousness. As such, the spirit soul has to be engaged in a good work of Krishna consciousness, otherwise it will be engaged in occupations dictated by illusory energy. In contact with material energy, the spirit soul acquires material modes, meaning goodness, passion, and ignorance. And to purify the soul from such affinities, it is necessary to engage in the prescribed duties enjoined in the Shastras. But if the soul is engaged in its natural function of Krishna consciousness, whatever he is able to do is good for him. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17 affirms this. Tyakva swa dharmam charanam bhujam harir. Bhajana pakvo tapatet tato yadi. Yatra kwa babadram abud amusyakim. Kovarta apto bhajatam swadharmataha. If someone takes to Krishna consciousness, even though he may not follow the prescribed duties in the Shastras or execute the devotional service properly, and even though he may fall down from the standard, there is no loss or evil for him. But if he carries out all the injunctions for purification in the Shastras, what does it avail him if he is not Krishna conscious? So the purificatory process is necessary for reaching this point of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sannyasa or any purificatory process is to help reach the ultimate goal of becoming Krishna conscious, without which everything is considered a failure. Even if you do pujas the rest of your life, but you don't actually develop love for Krishna, it was actually considered a waste of time. You just wasted your time and energy and money. Therefore it says, Rasoham apsakonte apavasmi sasisuraya. It says, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinam rasovarjam rasapiyasya param dristva nivartate. So this verse in the second chapter, 40 something, says that even if one restricts the senses from the sense objects, but the mind continues to dwell on those objects, then basically one is not liberated. However, if one restrains the senses and develops a higher taste by ceasing engagements in sense enjoyment, by experiencing higher taste, then he's fixed in consciousness. So this is the second chapter, 59th verse. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Right. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, unless one is transcendently situated, it's not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like Astanga Yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge, but one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness, no longer has a taste for dead material things. Therefore, restrictions are there for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life, but such restrictions are only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. So, restriction is only good if it leads to developing a taste for Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it's all the restrictions and headache you have following them is basically a waste of time. So how to get that taste? Well, that requires the association of people who have that taste. When you're associating with people who are Susukam kartum abhyam, always experiencing transcendental bliss, doing devotional service, remembering Krishna, serving Krishna, then you'll also develop that taste. And if one takes the Krishna consciousness but falls down, you're not a loser. Because whatever you did, you'll take up in your next life from the point you left off. Right? Nehabi kramanastosti pratijaya navidyate. Swapam apiyasya dharmasya chayate mahato bayat. That Krishna explains that second chapter, 14th verse. No, that's not 14th verse, sorry. Second chapter, 40th verse. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So that's Tyakva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apakvota patet tato yadi. If one takes the Krishna consciousness, even though they may not follow the prescribed duties in the Shastras or execute the devotional service properly, and even though he may fall down from the standard, there is no loss or evil for him. So you're never a loser in Krishna consciousness. But if you follow all the rules and regulations of the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas for material benefit, and in the end you don't develop Krishna consciousness, then everything you did was a waste of time. And no value at all. So activity in Krishna consciousness in second chapter 40th verse in the purport, Prabhupada says, activity in Krishna consciousness or acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification is the highest transcendental quality of work. So this is yoga karma sukoshalam. This is what we're talking about. Acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification. In fact, that point is emphasized in the third chapter, where it says, Avritam jnanam etena jnanino nityavarinam kamarupena konteya dusparen analinacha. It says, thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, in the material world, the center of all activities is sex. And thus, this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of the living entity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. So there's Krishna consciousness and illicit sex don't go together. Prabhupada says this in the beginning of the third chapter. He says, the same chapter, but he says that he says, I'll find that verse later. Okay, so the devotee becomes purified of all these tendencies just by engagement in devotional service. You don't have to take any courses. You don't need a life coach. You just simply have to be engaged in devotional service under the tutelage of bona fide devotees. So this is called working for the satisfaction of the Lord. It's called the great art of doing work. 3rd chapter, 9th verse, Prabhupada mentions this. He says, therefore, one has to work for the satisfaction of Vishnu. Any other work done in this material world will be the cause of bondage. For both good and evil work have their reactions. And any reaction binds the performer. Therefore, one has to work in Krishna consciousness to satisfy Krishna or Vishnu. And while performing such activities, one is in a liberated state. This is the great art of work. Okay? Yoga, karma, sukoshalam, our subject. And in the beginning, this process requires very expert guidance. One should therefore act very diligently under the expert guidance of a devotee of Lord Krishna, or under the direct instruction of Lord Krishna himself, under whom Arjuna had the opportunity to work. Nothing should be performed for sense gratification, but everything should be done for the satisfaction of Krishna. This practice will not only save one from the reaction of work, but also gradually elevate one to the transcendental loving service of the Lord, which alone can raise one to the kingdom of God. So, the great art of doing work. Yajnartat karmanonyatra loko mam karma bandhanai tadartam karma konteya muktasanga samachara. 3rd chapter, 9th verse. So coming back to the 2nd chapter, 40th verse, activity in Krishna consciousness or acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification is the highest transcendental quality of work. Even a small beginning of such activity finds no impediment. No one, nor can that small beginning be lost at any stage. Any work begun on the material plane has to be completed, otherwise the whole attempt becomes a failure. But any work begun in Krishna consciousness has a permanent effect, even though not finished. The performer of such work is therefore not at a loss, even if his work in Krishna consciousness is incomplete. 1% done in Krishna consciousness bears permanent results, so that the next beginning is from the point of 2%, whereas in material activity, without 100% success, there's no profit. Ajamila performed his duty in some percentage of Krishna consciousness, but the result he enjoyed at the end was 100% by the grace of the Lord. There's a nice verse in this connection in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17. So this is the same verse we just read in the 3rd chapter. If someone gives up his occupational duties and works in Krishna consciousness and then falls down on account of not completing his work, what loss is there on his part? And what can one gain if one performs his material activities perfectly? Or as the Christians say, what profiteth a man if he gain the whole world yet suffers the loss of his eternal soul? Material activities and their results end with the material body. But work in Krishna consciousness carries a person again to Krishna consciousness, even after the loss of the body. At least one is sure to have a chance in the next life of being born as a human being, either in the family of a great cultured Brahmana or in a rich aristocratic family that will give one a further chance for elevation. That is the unique quality of work done in Krishna consciousness. So, Prabhupada is very eloquently explaining the glories of devotional service. And we should take his instructions very seriously. Okay, so next we're going to I want to come back to this point about standards. The teacher cannot manufacture rules against the principles of revealed scriptures. The revealed scriptures like the Manu Samhita and similar others are considered the standard books to be followed by human society. Thus, the leader's teaching should be based on the principles of such standard shastras. One who desires to improve himself must follow the standard rules as they are practiced by the great teachers. The Srimad Bhagavatam also affirms that one should follow in the footsteps of great devotees. Mahajana yena gata sapanta. You have to follow the panth, the path of the Mahajan. And that is the way of progress on the path of spiritual realization. The king or the executive head of state, the father, and the school teacher are all considered to be natural leaders of the innocent people in general. And all such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must be conversant with the standard books of moral and spiritual codes. And the highest moral treatise is Bhagavad Gita. Treatise means a scholarly presentation. So we should strictly follow, not imitate, but strictly follow the Bhagavad Gita in all our endeavors, the instructions that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so now, next. Yes. So it says, one should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed duties for others. This is 3rd chapter, 35th verse. Purport. Materially prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition, under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death, rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation and should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principles of non-violence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmana, or a Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions in the material world do not apply. For example, Vishwamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmana, whereas Parashurama was a Brahmana, but later on he acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendentally situated, they could do so, but as long as one is on the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. So here we see that we need to have an expert helping us in our spiritual life. Otherwise, we'll make many, many mistakes and ultimately we'll fail. Okay, so this 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita is all about karma yoga. And it explains a lot of important facts about life. Okay, now we're going to continue speaking now very specifically about the art of work. We look at the 3rd chapter, 17th verse. Yastvatma ratir eva syad atma triptas chamanava Atmani eva cha santustas tasya karyam na vidyate. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, notice self is capitalized. That means speaking about Krishna, whose human life is one of self-realization. Here self is small s. And who is satisfied in the self, capital S, fully satiated. For him there is no duty. Okay. No duty, that means you don't have to follow mundane rules and regulations. Like if there might be a mundane rule or regulation that says if someone dies in your family, you shouldn't go to the temple, you shouldn't chant Hare Krishna, you shouldn't eat prasadam, you shouldn't do anything for 30 days. Well, yeah, that's true for the meat eaters, the Hindus that eat meat, the Hindus that gamble, Hindus that engage in illicit sex, and so forth. But a devotee doesn't have to follow that rule, because every day of his life he's sacrificing. He's engaged in Krishna's service, offering his food, chanting his rounds, waking up early, taking bath twice, 3 times a day. So it says, but for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. A person who is fully Krishna conscious and fully satisfied by his acts in Krishna consciousness no longer has any duty to perform. Due to his being Krishna conscious, all impiety within is instantly cleansed, an effect of many, many thousands of yajna performances. In other words, instantly it's done. You don't have to perform thousands of yajnas to get such purification. By such clearing of consciousness, one becomes fully confident of his eternal position in relationship with the Supreme. His duty thus becomes self-illuminated by the grace of the Lord. What self-illuminated duty means, he's convinced that he should always be engaged in Krishna's service under the instructions of bona fide Guru. He doesn't see himself doing anything else. His duty thus becomes self-illuminated by the grace of the Lord, and therefore he no longer has any obligation to the Vedic injunctions. Such a Krishna-conscious person is no longer interested in material activities and no longer takes pleasure in material arrangements like wine, women, and similar infatuations. So this is a clearing of the consciousness, and therefore one no longer has mundane obligations. And then the next verse says, a self-realized person has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains, a self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verses. A Krishna-conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. Tasmat ashakta satatam karyam karma samachara asakto hi acharan karma param apnoti purushaha. This is one of those important verses that even Prabhupada would quote often also. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. So we discussed that in depth, acting as a matter of duty. Some people think, oh, I'm acting because of love. That is the worst criterion, because who knows what love means? There's only one word for love in English. There's 50 words for love in Sanskrit. There's love between a man and a woman. There's love between a mother and a child. There's love between a father and a child. There's love between two friends. There's so many different types of love, but there's only one word for love in English. And what it actually means is confusing, because most of the time there's no real love, it's just lust, right? So love is a very exalted emotion. And it's defined in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It says, if there's a reason for a husband and wife to separate, but they don't separate, that means there must be love. They define it like that. So when Krishna leaves Vrindavan, that would have been a good reason for the gopis to forget Krishna, right? They didn't forget him. In fact, they couldn't take their mind off of him. The longer he stayed away, the more intense became their meditation on him. That means they actually loved him very much. Okay. So, love and separation that is ever increasing, that's real love. Like once I did a funeral and the wife lost her husband. He died. And she gave a little speech and said, I don't think I'm going to live very much longer because I can't live without my husband. Well, make a long story short, she's still alive. Right? It's not like, she committed sati at her husband's funeral. No way. When we put the husband in the oven, we didn't have to hold her back from jumping in the oven, right? And she's still doing okay today, right? Still alive. So that was a bunch of BS that she spoke. So there's no, but one doesn't have to commit suicide. The gopis didn't commit suicide. Sita didn't commit suicide. But love in absentia is even stronger than love in proximity. And this is what Lord Chaitanya demonstrated when he came 500 years ago. He demonstrated vipralamba bhava, love and separation of Krishna. It's even more powerful than love in proximity, because one cannot take their mind off of their lover. Right? So here it says, the Supreme is the personality of Godhead for the devotees and liberation for the impersonalists. A person, therefore, acting for Krishna or in Krishna consciousness under proper guidance and without attachment to the result of the work is certainly making progress toward the supreme goal of life. Arjuna is told that he should fight in the battle of Kurukshetra for the interest of Krishna because Krishna wanted him to fight. To be a good man or a non-violent man is a personal attachment, but to act on behalf of the Supreme is to act without attachment for the result. That is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Vedic rituals, like prescribed sacrifices, are performed for purification of impious activities that were performed in the field of sense gratification. But action in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to the reactions of good or evil work. A Krishna conscious person has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. He engages in all kinds of activities, but is completely non-attached. So this is acting out of duty, right? The duty is to please the Lord. Therefore, one has not even a hint of the desire to please him or herself. That is the special quality of pure devotion. And this is what Krishna is teaching in Bhagavad Gita. Pure devotion without any selfish motive. Now, such a thing, when there's a genuine pure thing, it's very precious. People recognize it right away. They recognize the sincerity, they recognize the purity of intention. And Prabhupada explains the secret of Krishna consciousness. He says, that fifth chapter, verse number 12. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he or she offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. The difference between a person in Krishna consciousness and a person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached to Krishna, whereas the latter is attached to the results of his activities. The person who is attached to Krishna and works for him only is certainly a liberated person, and he has no anxiety over the results of his work. In the Bhagavatam, the cause of anxiety over the result of an activity is explained as being one's functioning in the conception of duality, that is, without knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. In Krishna consciousness, there's no duality. All that exists is a product of Krishna's energy, and Krishna is all good. Therefore, activities in Krishna consciousness are on the absolute plane. They are transcendental and have no material effect. One is therefore filled with peace in Krishna consciousness, but one who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have that peace. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Realization that there is no existence besides Krishna is the platform of peace and fearlessness. So this is a genuine explanation of what is the art of work. 5th chapter, 12th verse. And now we come to that other point that I was looking for. 5th chapter, 21st verse says, the highest pleasure in terms of matter is sex pleasure. The whole world is moving under its spell, and a materialist cannot work at all without this motivation. But a person engaged in Krishna consciousness can work with greater vigor without sex pleasure, which he avoids, or he or she avoids. That is the test in spiritual realization. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. A Krishna conscious person is not attracted to any kind of sense pleasure due to his being a liberated soul. So, here is the real test. And most, if not all people, fail this test. But one is not obliged to fail the test. One just needs to have enough knowledge to see the dark future of that path. The dark future is, one example is the so-called Bhagavan Rajneesh. His whole theory was never deny sex pleasure. Never deny it. So his yoga was complete sexual satisfaction. Right? And look what happened. His whole thing fell apart. Because the more you feed the fire, the more it burns. It doesn't go out eventually by feeding it. It just gets bigger and bigger. So, therefore, one cannot achieve any spiritual goal by engaging in illicit sexual activity. And look what's happening. You just read the newspaper. All these big guys, every one of them is falling down. Everyone is being shamed. Everyone is being accused of being a molester, a woman, let's say, exploiter, and so forth. You know, and each one of them were so arrogant. They thought they could get away with their outrageous, absolutely abominable activity. They thought they could get away with it, and they did get away with it for years. And now it's caught up to them. You see. And you think the older they get, they might give up. No, they get more vicious the older they get. More vicious. You know. The best example is this John Conyers, a real nasty, dirty old man. He's a hero for black people because he was one of Martin Luther King's, staunch followers, right? And he was a real activist during the demonstrations in the 1960s for voting rights for black people, etc. But he's a low-class, disgusting, scum-like person, right? And he's a hero for millions of people in the country. But now they know the truth about him. He's a piece of crap, Not only him, so many others now are being revealed to be very low-class people and not deserving any honor. In fact, People are pulling back all the honors. Bill Crosby and Harvey Weinstein, all these people, all the accolades, all the honors they got, all the honorary university degrees, all the recognition by different, they've all been taken away from them. People have revoked all those honors now because they've turned out to be low-class people. See? So, why be fooled by the examples of these rascals? You know, you think they get away with things. No one gets away with anything in this world because Krishna is the ultimate witness. Therefore, we should follow Krishna consciousness strictly. If you want to be peaceful, if you want to be happy, if you want to be free, then we should follow Krishna consciousness. You want to be chained indefinitely to birth and death, old age and disease, and repeat the same old over and over again, then ignore Krishna consciousness and go on your merry way, becoming an idiot in the material world. Okay, so we'll stop right here on 5th chapter, verse number 12 and 21. And we'll continue tomorrow and finish our seminar. Of course, this subject is never finished, but we'll finish, give a semblance of finishing tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions? Yeah. Okay, he raised first. What was your question?
Duality, when does the source of the duality, when does it actually start?
What's that?
Duality?
Duality, yeah. As soon as you forget Krishna. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam. Bhayam dvitiya vinivesita syat. A very famous verse. Let me just find it. It's in the 11th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. One second. Yeah. Bhayam dvitiya binivesita syad isad apetasya viparya yo smriti tanmaya yato buddha abhajet tvam bhaktyayakaya sam guru devat atma. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service to the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and as his very life and soul. So, this fear arises when we identify with the material body. And at that point, one second, there's another verse that Dwight, yes. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it says, Dvaita Bhadra Bhadra Jnana Sabha Manodharma E Bala E Manda E Sabha Brahma. In the material world, the conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculations. Therefore saying, this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. So, the beginning of our problem is not understanding that we have an eternal soul. As soon as we think that we don't have an eternal soul, we just have a temporary body, we develop fear. And right at that point, the duality begins, because there's a duality between the body and the eternal soul, right? But we forget about the soul. Now, there's a duality between, should I do this, should I do that? It's a duality in which object should I focus on? The new car, the new house, the new job, the new man, the new woman, the new friend. So as soon as we forget about Krishna, we only focus on the body and sense gratification, we become subject to duality. Okay? And the beginning of it is this fear that develops because we think that we're just have temporary existence. And all these dualities are actually mental speculations. See? They're all mental speculations. Just like, there's going to be a huge earthquake in Seattle. The whole city is going to be destroyed very shortly. They're announcing it on the television. Or, Y2K, or the Mayan calendar says that the world is coming to an end in December 2014. All these fears, they're all fear. And the ultimate fear is when we don't accept that we have an eternal soul and we are just a body. Immediately we're overcome by fear of death. And as soon as that fear is there, many doubts arise. And those doubts arise due to dualities, happiness and distress, cold and heat, wealth and poverty, war and peace, hate and love. These things all take place because we don't have one final goal in life, to please Krishna. Therefore, we're always attacked by these dualities. And duality is the way Maya keeps us in the material world. And the whole thing begins with agyaya, ignorance of the eternal soul. Haribol. Any other questions? Yes, you're good.
How the karma is related to art of God? How it affects the art of God, karma?
Yeah.
In past life?
Well, if you know what Krishna says, he says, karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. In the Brahma Samhita, Krishna promises that he will eradicate all your past karma if you surrender unto him. So this is Brahma Samhita, verse number verse number 50. 54. Yastrinda gopam atavenda hosvakarma bandhanu rupa falabhajanam atanoti karmani nirdahati kintu chabhakti bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion and impartially ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities. So, he gives us the fruits of our activities, or he burns up all the reactions to our fruitive activities, right? So someone who's a materialist, he gives the fruits of activities to that person. But someone who becomes a devotee, he burns up the reactions to all fruits of activities from the past. In other words, he purges out by the fire of ordeal the root of all karma, that is, ignorance and evil desires. Karma, though without beginning, is still perishable. Karma of those who work with the hope of enjoying the fruits of their labors becomes everlasting and endless, and is never destroyed. The function of sannyas is also a sort of karma befitting an ashrama, and is not pleasant to Krishna when it aims at liberation, that is, desire for liberation. They also receive fruition of their karma, and even if it is be disinterested, their karma ends in atma mamata, self-pleasure. But those who are pure devotees always serve Krishna by gratifying his senses forsaking all attempts of karma and jnana, and being free from all desires save that of serving Krishna. Krishna has fully destroyed the karma, its desires, and ignorance of those devotees. It is a great wonder that Krishna, being impartial, is fully partial to his devotees. In other words, he says, you surrender to me, I eradicate all your karma. Because without eradicating all previous karma, one cannot engage in devotional service. Yesam twantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta bhajante mam dritavrataha. 7th chapter, 28th verse of Bhagavad Gita. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So here's the answer to your to his question and to your question. When all your karma is eradicated because you act uniquely in the service of Krishna, then you're free from dualities, and you're free from all previous karma, and then you engage in Krishna's service with determination. Right? 7th chapter, 28th verse answers the question, both questions. Your question is, how did it begin? Okay, it began by forgetting Krishna. If you remember Krishna always, you have one goal in life. If you forget Krishna, you end up in duality. You can't make your mind up. Should it be this way or that way? Right? But if you have one goal in life, that is to serve Krishna, then you're free from duality. Right? And if you actually engage wholeheartedly in devotional service and agree to be corrected by Shiksha and Diksha gurus, then you're free from all your karma also. Yeah. So that should be your verse 728. Answers a lot of questions. Any other questions? Yeah.
People they know that they will also die. So why they continue doing all these things, and even when they get old, they even do more fun than that?
Because they don't have a bona fide guru. They accept false gurus because they can manipulate them with money and false praise. Right? There's a saying in Bengali, one who praises too much is a cheater. Yeah. So, yeah, they feed the false ego of the guru with money and praise, and then they control the guru. And they try and get the guru to whitewash their sins and validate their material desires. And there are gurus like that. As long as you give them money, they say, okay, my son, you can do whatever you want. Real guru will chastise the disciple. If you get chastised by the guru, that means he actually loves you. But if he says TK TK all the time, whatever you do, that means he's not actually a guru. He just wants your money. That's all he wants. No, what we need to see are sincere people. So, my hunch is we're going to see something very real next Friday night. You should definitely come to the temple next Friday night. You're going to see something. If what happens that I think is going to happen, you're going to see something really amazing. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. You have to come Friday night to see it.
Evening? Friday night?
Yeah, evening, 7 o'clock. Yeah.
I want to share that Advait and Shrikant, they distributed 10 books last week and collected 70 Lakshmi dollars.
Hari Bol.
He has helped me on Saturday, I don't know, Saturday or Friday last week, to consolidate like 3-4 months more. And then he was like, I really want all the adults to come and do something good. He was saying, I'm very sad that there's no Sankirtan. I want to go to door, and then he did.
How did they distribute those books?
He did it in the temple.
So that's Sankirtan, isn't it?
Yes, so I want to.
In fact, it's even better in the temple. There's so many new people coming here every day. You can't stop Sankirtan except if you speculate, then you stop it. The best Sankirtan is in the temple. You're getting new people here coming every day. They're moving here from different parts of the United States and the world, and they're coming to the temple just like flies are attracted to the honey.
So what when target is to get money for back to project. It could collect, it could be our point of contact for people.
Good. Every BTG you